Hello and welcome back to part 2 on the command line interface. Last week, we took a look at what a command line interface is, as well as how to do some basic operations. Today, we go a little further in depth. It is the 22nd of May 2013, a Wednesday. You're watching 0612 TV.
This is 0612 TV.
Welcome aboard.
So alright, without further ado, let us jump right in. The first thing I want to talk about today is the concept of a parameter. Now, let us kind of dissect the commands we've been working with. In particular, let us take a look first at a simple command. CLS just means clear screen. There's literally nothing more to that. You just call a command and it does what it's supposed to do. Some commands, however, don't actually operate by themselves. For example, if I were to just say cd, well, the command doesn't know how to react, because cd, which stands for change directory, needs you to tell it to change directory to what. So in fact, when you're doing cd space and a folder name, what you're doing is you're telling it, I want to change directories, and this is the directory I want to change to. cd by itself is of course meaningless, since you do have to give it a destination. This is the concept of a parameter. A command exists by itself, and perhaps if you were to give it a parameter, then it can actually perform whatever its function is on that parameter. Let's take a look at another example. Let's say the command help. Now, this is slightly different from the case of cd, because when you type cd, it is actually meaningless. When you type help, there is a meaning. However, when you give help a particular parameter, it changes the way help works. So by just typing help gives you a list of all the commands. If you want to find out about a particular command, you type help space and that command, and you will only get information about that particular command. And that is going to be more detailed than if you were to just see it from the help page. In this case, the parameter is the second item, and by passing in that parameter, help runs on that parameter and gives you the help information for that. So generalizing on this idea, commands are normally able to accept parameters and actually devote their action to whatever you tell it to in that parameter. Knowing that, we can then move on to some of the file manipulating commands provided by the command line. Let's start with mkdir, or make directory. As its name implies, calling make directory with a parameter creates a folder in wherever you're parked by whatever name you give it as parameter. So for example, now I'm in this directory and I say make directory test. When I do another directory listing, there you go, the new folder test is there. I can then switch directories into it and do whatever other things I want to do. Similarly, a command like move or copy essentially is quite intuitive. Let's say now I want to move this file into the folder test, which I've just created. All I have to do is to type move sample.txt space test/sample.txt. Now, notice what's interesting about the move command is that it cannot operate with just one parameter. It must operate with two. And of course, the reason should be trivial. When you want to move something, you've got to move something from a source to a destination. The first parameter tells the move command what file you're trying to move, and the second parameter tells the command where you want to move it to. Now, interestingly, the move command also acts like rename, despite the fact that rename does have its own command. For example, now if I were to just go into the test folder to look for sample.txt, first of all, yes, we will see it there, meaning that the move we did earlier was successful. Now, let's say I want to rename this file to sample_file.txt. What I can do is I can do move sample.txt space and then sample_file.txt. So essentially, instead of moving it from one directory to another, what you're doing now is you're moving it from one file name to another. You can of course combine these two. You can move something from one folder to another and change its name at the same time. So yeah, if we were to do a directory listing now, you will notice that sample.txt is gone and it's actually replaced by sample_file.txt. Delete. I don't really need to tell you much about how this works or what it does, because I'm pretty sure you can guess. Delete space sample_file.txt gets rid of a file called sample file. Now of course, the delete command, just like the delete button on your keyboard, shouldn't be used without caution, because if you delete something important, it's gone. Well, not really gone, but you get the idea. Don't delete anything you're not supposed to delete, that's all I'm saying. So how do we write to a file? Well, there are actually a lot of ways to write files. For example, if I were to call edit, I would see this. That is, if I was running a 32-bit version of Windows. Now, I actually covered some features of this application in my original video. Unfortunately, due to the fact that I'm running 64-bit Windows 7, I will not be able to demonstrate any of these features to you. Which is why I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut out this portion of the video. So knowing that, let us move rapidly along. You think that's hardcore? We'll go even more hardcore. Let's write a text file within the console itself. So okay, let's try this. Let's clear the screen and let's say copycon test.txt. Now let's take a look at what this command essentially says before we continue. Now you know what copy means? Copy means copy from source to destination. So what does copycon file name mean? Con stands for console. Instead of looking for a file called con, what it's gonna do is it's gonna just get whatever you type from the console and copy it into a file of that name. What this means is essentially you're creating a file with the very text prompt that is appearing in front of you. Now, the more observant among you would probably then ask, what if I wanted to copy a file or a directory called con? Well, guess what? Such a file or directory will never exist in the first place. Under no circumstances will you be able to create any files or folders under that name. So, copycon test.txt, I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to type some text. After typing a few lines of random stuff, I'm going to then hit Ctrl Z. Now, Ctrl Z is not undo, not in the command line days at least. Instead, it actually means end of input. So after I type Ctrl Z and I hit enter, I'm actually returned to the command line. If I were to actually open up my Windows Explorer window now and to look for test.txt, there you go, that's everything I typed into the console, now saved to a text file. By the way, I don't actually have to open Windows Explorer to look at a text file. What I can do is I can type and the name of the text file. For example, in this case, type test.txt, and when I hit enter, well, the contents of the text file is going to be printed to the console. So there you go, there are a few more file manipulation commands for you. So then, Ctrl Z, let us take a look at, the whole control thing, and just to see, how it works and what it does. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are only two important keystrokes using the control button that you have to care about. Ctrl Z sends an end of input key. What this essentially means for most programs that actually ask for input is that, well, you're done, and the program can continue executing whatever it's supposed to be executing. Ctrl C, however, halts the program. For example, now I've written a very small program in Java that is actually going to run forever. What I'm going to do now to actually stop this, because obviously if you had a command window, you're not going to be able to, close the window or anything. The way to interrupt and stop this is to press Ctrl C. Just like Ctrl Z, Ctrl C is not copy, at least not in the console days. Ctrl C means essentially just interrupt, stop whatever it is you are doing. This will pretty much always work. Pressing Ctrl C will just cancel whatever is going on and bring you back to the command line. This remains true even if, let's say I say directory/pause, I can actually press Ctrl C if I don't want to see any more of the prompt from the directory call. And of course, it's useful for terminating programs that, run forever, like that little program that I wrote. Now, let's talk a little bit about redirection and pipes. Now, redirection is a little bit hard to show, with the commands that we've been looking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write another Java program. This little program essentially is going to ask me for my name, it's going to ask me for my age, and it's going to say hi to me. It's a really simple program that I wrote just for demonstrating redirection. So here's the deal. If I decided that instead of typing in the information that the program wants, I want to actually make the program read it from a file, what I can do is this. I call the program normally, but before I hit enter, I'm going to actually write the left angle bracket symbol. Then I'm going to type space and the name of a text file. Now, this text file actually contains the information that the program needs to run, which is first a name, then an age. So when I hit enter, my program doesn't actually have to ask the console for input. It just goes to the file and gets whatever it needs. Which is why on screen, you're going to still see the prompts from that program. However, I won't have to enter anything. The final output of the program simply appears on screen. So that's that. Now, there is another kind of redirection, which is the right angle bracket redirection. Obviously, if the left angle bracket means I want to take input from a particular file, the right angle bracket must mean I want to take the output and dump it into that particular file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing, except I'm going to use the right angle bracket and a different file name. Of course, if I were to use the same file name, it will overwrite that previous file, so we don't want to do that. Since I didn't give it any input, I'm going to have to actually type in my name and my age. But you realize now that I'm not actually prompted for either of this, for the very simple reason that the output that it's supposed to be showing me is now actually being redirected to that file. However, I know what I have to do, so I'm going to type both of that, I'm going to hit enter, I'm going to see nothing on screen whatsoever. However, if I were to open the output file, you realize that in fact, all the information has gone there. What's that to say we can't combine the left and the right angle brackets? If we do both, input comes from the input file, output goes to the output file, nothing appears in the console. Of course, the program should work normally. Finally, let's take a look at pipes. The concept behind pipes essentially works like a redirect, but instead of taking the output of a program and putting it into a file, it's going to take the output of a program and put it into another program. So let's go back to, well, the help command. You realize that there's quite a lot of help and it overshoots the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make use of this command called more. Here's how more works. When it takes in whatever text for input, it's going to only show enough to fill the screen. And when you hit the spacebar, it's going to scroll line by line. When you hit enter, it's going to scroll by page. Obviously, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get all the information from help, put it through more so that we can read it slowly. To do that, we type help first, space, pipe, that is shift, backslash, then you type space, and you type more. So what this means is the output of help, put it through the more command. And this is what we get. Now we can actually read through everything you see in the help menu. And that's it. In fact, that's actually all I wanted to cover with you for this series. For those of you who are confident with the command line or you've used it a lot, you will know that I missed out quite a lot of things like batch files. And by the way, batch files are actually executable files. Inside are all command line commands. When you run it, it normally does things in a batch. And things can get pretty complex. You can even do things like loops. So it's a little bit too complex for this series, I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, that essentially wraps it up for the basics. However, we do have one more episode to this series, and that I will show you the Unix console. That's all there is for this episode. If you have any comments, queries or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow the official Twitter for this channel at twitter.com/0612tv. As always, I appreciate every like, favorite and subscription you give me. Until next time, you are watching 0612TV.